It is 2,480 years BC, and there is nothing to be seen in this part of the Sahara Desert. Nothing but the shifting sand. But
they brought me here to labor on a task that mystified me. My life's work has been an attempt to understand it. And now my life's work is complete. They came for me one evening late in summer, in the village where I was born, the only world I had ever known. In the name of the king, in the name of the king. It always used those words when they'd come for my father and my grandfather before. Now they had come for my brother, Deba, and for me. I remember my sister cried when we left. My mother didn't. You're the oldest, she said. Take care of Deba.
they'd have arrived every summer in the early years of Khufu's reign. Royal officials dispatched the length and breadth of the Nile, selecting able-bodied men for the service of the king.
It was hard to leave. We worried how the family would cope until we came back. I wonder what I'd have felt if I'd known the truth, that I was never coming back. As we sat there, I had this sudden memory of stories grandfather had told me about great stone steps he'd built into the sky. I tried to imagine those steps. I couldn't. The official, a man called Karim R, went to the neighboring village for the others. Everyone chattered about where we were going and what we'd had to do, but no one really knew. And Karim R said nothing to explain. Just that we owed everything to the king, and that now we would have the chance to repay him.
Young conscripts like Nakht and Deba had no reason to approach the start of their journey with dread. Contrary to popular myth, not one of the people who built the Great Pyramid was a slave. Egypt had no need of slaves. And all because of the Nile.
We joined in the familiar prayer. Hail to you, O Nile, sprung from the ground, who produces the barley and makes the wheat to grow. You rise, and the lands exult, and in everyone there is joy.
The river's annual flood, covering the land in fertile silt, made Egypt's farmlands uniquely rich. One of the first countries in history could labor on other things instead, such as building pyramids.
Days passed and the boat became like home. But it was strange to have no work to do. The landscape still looked like it did near our village. Cliffs, fields, and there was always the river, a ruled line of blue. You could almost believe we had come no distance at all, until one afternoon. It was the hottest part of the day. Set back thought of my grandfather. So he had built his great stone steps. I thought it's the same for Deba and me. That's what we're being sent to do. That evening we moored nearby. I couldn't sleep.
The stone steps Nakht had seen stand at Saqqara. This is the oldest intact stone monument in the world and the first key to unlocking the mystery of the pyramids. 60 years before King Khufu, the Egyptians first constructed this now familiar shape by laying 6 great rectangles of stone, one on top of the other. This had enabled them to create a monument that they believed possessed immense secret power. At the beginning of time, according to Egyptian myth, there was nothing but watery chaos. From that chaos had emerged the first mound of dry land, in the shape of a pyramid. It was a shape that symbolized life, but some impulse had made the Egyptians choose that shape for a tomb, the tomb of their king. "60 years later, in 2480 BC, the same impulse had brought the new king, Khufu, out to the desert with a carefully chosen retinue. He was here to witness the first and most important ceremony of his entire reign.
Before long, I began to make it out. It's very highly controlled, the king's work. Everyone has a place and a purpose.
$5 million tons of stone would be needed for the Great Pyramid, the vast majority quarried on site at Giza. It's currently estimated that it took around 1,500 men to quarry it. Theirs was a skilled job, not one for raw conscripts like Nakht and Deba. Each quarryman was issued with a copper chisel. Copper was the hardest metal known to the Egyptians, but it still blunts easily within about 100 blows or so. So there was a support group of men to sharpen the chisels, another specialist task. Each man would take a blunt chisel, soften it in the fire, reshape the tip, and then temper it in water before getting it back into use. That meant another group was needed to bring the sharpeners tinder for their fires, and water too. These would certainly have been suitable tasks for the untrained conscripts. Another specialist group in the quarry was the scribes. To ensure that it reached its correct destination, Every block was marked with a different symbol, ready to be transported to the...
Our foreman had singled us out as quick learners. Grandfather had always said, if you want to get on, keep in with the boss. We soon worked out there was a real knack to this work. Without water, the sledge would stick fast. Add just enough, and it slid easily. It's the tuffler, the clay you get at Giza. Once it's wet, everything will slide on it. The best part of a working day was evening, when we washed and ate. We'd work 9 days and rest on the 10th. We settled quickly to the work. Other conscripts were allowed back to their villages after a few months, but we were kept on. I never felt lonely because of Deba. At night we'd hear the lions out in the desert, and we'd talk of our villages. We may have said we were homesick, but in truth, we had become each other's family. We had all grown used to the rhythms of our barracks and our work. Rhythms that never changed. Until one morning. We'd been at Giza a little less than a year. It was nearly noon, and we had broken for something to eat when noon came to us. We were to report for a new job. All these years I had been working on a tomb, and until now I had never thought of death. When Deba died, a vision came back to me. Once, when we were tiny, we had seen a great glittering boat sweep past our village. Our mother told us it must have been the king, and that we should have bowed because we owed him everything. But now it seemed everything that mattered to me had been taken away. And all in the name of the king. It was then that I knew that I too would die at Giza. I had been entrusted with my brother's life.
All this to observe the construction of the pyramid. It was certainly his greatest undertaking as a king. In the desert, there is an outcrop of rock, the only place at Giza from which the entire pyramid landscape is visible. The king would have been attended by his main architect, his cousin, Hemiunu. Beneath them, the king would have been able to see some 25,000 workers. Conscripts, quarrymen, stone haulers, setters, masons, for whom he was responsible, whom he had brought to Giza to collaborate as humans never had before. What had driven him to do it? To answer that question long seemed only a distant possibility. Until, just over a century ago, archaeologists working on the pyramid of a later king called Unas unearthed a chamber whose walls were covered in Egyptian hieroglyphs. The pyramid texts provide a tantalizing glimpse into the minds of the men who built the pyramids. From these spells, incantations, and riddles, a story emerges, the story of a journey. The king travels, and travels up. His journey is described in many ways, as a falcon, or with the aid of natural storms of wind and hail and lightning. That the king can now go forth among the indestructibles. To understand this mystery is to understand the very purpose of a pyramid. But these mysterious beliefs were not widely understood. They were the preserve of an initiated few. Khufu's workers had more ordinary concerns, ensuring that 1,000 tons of stone were moved each day onto the pyramid's slowly rising surface.
And I seated myself on top of the first block at one end of the chamber. I held up a plumb bob, and I aligned it with both the red reference mark on the incoming block and the central marker post beyond. That way I could keep the block exactly central as it passed over the chamber. Such a vast weight had to be perfectly distributed. The words of Hemiunu's blessing were ringing in my ears. So this holy chamber was the center, the purpose of the whole pyramid. It had to be protected.
Khufu's architects were facing a structural problem never faced before in history. The mass of stone with which they were working and the width they were spanning presented difficulties that would tax any modern construction engineer. It appears that soon after it was fitted, one of the granite roof blocks started to crack. The architect's first reaction was to repeat the roofing process a further 4 times. But the decisive innovation was to add a triangular wedge at the top, which redistributed the weight outwards rather than downwards. The crawl spaces between the 5 roofs, just 3.5 feet high, provide a unique glimpse into the lost world of the pyramid makers. Graffiti left behind by the workers spell out the names of the gangs. This is the mark of the strong boatmen of Khufu. Here, simply, the pure. It is even possible to see the red ochre reference marks, the means by which 4,500 years ago, master stone movers guided in the granite blocks with such phenomenal precision. pyramid's shadow, there were also 3 smaller pyramids for his queens. To the east of the pyramid, a great stone causeway stretched down to a temple by the edge of the Nile. This was the place to which Khufu's body would be brought when the day of his death came at last. That it finally did. A great bark had been specially constructed to transport the king's coffin down the Nile. Mantle, and it too would be buried at the foot of Khufu's pyramid. The king's coffin was of aromatic cedar, a rare and precious wood. It's likely that little else would have accompanied it. The extravagant gold and riches we associate with Tutankhamun belong to a much later age. The coffin was unloaded on the quayside before what the pyramid texts call the doors of heaven. It was as if the last stone of the whole structure was being put in place, and the most important stone of all. It is trained like a telescope at just one part of the night sky, at the circumpolar stars, the indestructibles. Khufu's builders believed they had constructed a resurrection machine, a machine that secured eternity, and not just for their king.
So Emunu's blessing has proven to be true. The king will rise again, and Enu shall cause his pyramid to be good and sturdy. They too will rise with him. They will share eternal possession of his crown. In the name of the king, it's clear now. In the name of the king. Through us he became indestructible, and we indestructible through him. Yunu, Karim Ah, Teba, myself, all of us, Egypt. The king is gone, but remains with us and we with him. As sure as the flooding of the Nile, the wheel continues to turn, and nothing and nobody can ever really be lost.
In the 400 and stripped of its outer stone, but it has endured, justifying in a way the faith of the men who built it. It's as close as anything on earth to eternity. It is in what happens to us when we die, and what should that mean for us while we're alive? They are the greatest of all questions, and the Egyptians built the greatest of all monuments,